Hello, lovelies! Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If it's your first time here, it's good to have you. Okay, we're just going to jump right into this. There's no point in being secretive, because you've already seen the thumbnail, you've already seen the title, you know what we're getting into. I'm making one of these. Not this one in particular. I made this last year, and was kind of sad that I didn't film the process, because I really wanted to share how I got this guy to look so good. If I do say so myself. I'm really proud of how he turned out. But anyway, so quick story. The reason that I made this is because about 10 years ago, my son dressed up as a pirate, and my husband got some pirate stuff to put on the front porch. 10 years later, my son hasn't dressed up like a pirate since, but we keep the pirate theme going on the porch. And I thought, you know what? Rather than fight it, I'm just going to give in. And I made this little guy a pirate prisoner to put on the porch. And he's awesome. He's really small though, and looks really small by himself. So I wanted to make another one in a slightly bigger size. That's what we're doing today. This whole process started because of this guy. Yeah, I'm holding his head on because I already jumped into starting his process, and I had to take his head off in order to try on his clothes. And I'm not going to bother putting it back on because he's going to need a little alteration. His neck is freakishly long, so that's going to have to be cut down. But otherwise, this little guy is really cool. As you can see from last year in comparison, I'm trying not to get that bright light in your eyeballs. Anyway, if you can see from last year's comparison, he's considerably bigger this year and really cool, fully articulated. He has movable ankles, knees, hips, wrists, elbow, and shoulders. So this will make him really nice for sticking in his cage. This little guy was not posable other than at the waist and shoulders. So in order to get him to move, I had to cut his joints and then glue them back on. So having a posable skeleton is going to be much easier this time. Oh, and I got this skeleton from Giant Tiger, if that's an option for you and you're looking for something similar. Although I'm pretty sure you can find them pretty much anywhere at this time of year. And for his cage, I got two of these. They're little plastic laundry baskets. Now originally, this is going to be quite different because I used this metal, like a waste paper basket thing. You can still get these at Dollar Tree. They're just too small. Obviously, I won't be able to fit this guy in those baskets. These are not ideal. They are nice in that they've got this like woven, prison texture, but I'm going to have to spray paint them, and they're not really open. I'm going to have to cut, I think, around the bottom and the top because there's nowhere to put a chain. I would like this to be hanging in the porch, just like that one. So this is going to require some modification. I got these two plasticky laundry baskets from Dollarama. They probably have something better at Dollar Tree. I'm limited on when and how I can get out because I have a dog. So, both a blessing and a curse. Anyway, I'm going to see if I can make this work. The skeleton so far, spoiler alert, he's already coming out really well. So rather than waste time blathering on here, let's just jump ahead and I will walk you through how I make clothes and distress. Mr. Bones here. Let's go. I started with a scrap of white cotton, which I still have a fair bit of thanks to the historically inspired costuming community and all the crafting I've done in regards to that. So what I did is I folded some of the scrap in half, and then I got my skeleton and I laid him down so that his shoulders, kind of the top of the rib cage, lined up with the fold. And then I measured down to about midway of his like hip bones there and made a mark with chalk on both sides. That's how long the shirt is going to be. And then I measured where the arms were from like shoulder bone to shoulder bone. And I made it a little bit bigger. I could have made it even bigger, but I made it a little bit bigger, made a chalk mark. And then with my ruler, I connected the chalk marks. Whee! And then I cut out that rectangle. This is like the simplest of simple shirt patterns possible. It's going to be ripped apart and painted on and completely distressed, so it doesn't need to be perfect. So there's my little rectangle for the shirt body. And then I took some more scrap and cut out some rectangles that weren't connected, and these two are going to be the sleeves. So for that, I did a finger press on the fold just to crispen it up a little bit so I could see it better. And this is a nice stiff cotton, so a finger press was more than enough. Then I didn't film this part, but I did a running stitch along the edge of both of the sleeves so that I could gather. I cut the rectangles a little bit bigger than I had planned to. Just it was the fabric that was available, and it turned out to be bigger than what I needed. So rather than cut it down, I decided to gather that top edge. I thought, it's kind of not necessary. I don't think it's going to end up being seen, but pirates have poofy sleeves. The gathers would make the sleeves poofy, which would make it look more like a pirate shirt. So what the heck? Then I folded that and creased the center so I could match up the two creases. And if you're using a pattern or a fabric that you can see like a good side and a not so good side, or a right and wrong side, whatever, or a front and back side, let's go with that, because neither of them are really the bad side. Anyway, if you have a pattern, then you put backside to backside, or no, front side to front side, pattern to pattern. This didn't matter. Again, it's on such a small scale, it doesn't matter. So I just put the two sides together, and then I sewed the sleeves to the body of the shirt. And then I folded it in half and sewed down the sleeve and the side of the shirt. Because this is smaller, I did have to pin it. I just found it, a little bit easier to keep everything matched up. You would think that it wouldn't be so unruly at this scale, but it is. Or at least it was for me. And now I'm just going to sew that side seam there. I sewed a bigger seam allowance at the cuff end of the sleeve. Again, just because the sleeve was a little bit too big, and I wasn't going to cuff the end of it. It was just going to be all frayed and jaggedy later. So I just made that smaller by making the seam bigger. And then by the time I got into the armpit, it was the regular 1/4 inch seam or whatever. I would just match it up with the presser foot. So whatever that ends up being. And then that same seam allowance down the side. And I do that on both sides. I did a back stitch for both of the seams that I sewed. Just because even though I'm going to distress this, I don't want it to completely fall apart. I'd like it to be somewhat sturdy. Wow, this footage is as soothing to watch back as it was to actually sew it. Interesting. Anyway, there's the shirt. I still have it inside out because I wanted to cut down that extra seam allowance that I sewed so that the seam wouldn't be too bulky when I turned it right side. So I'm just going to cut that off on both sleeves. And you may have noticed that I hadn't put a neckline or a head opening or whatever. So what I did is I folded the shirt back in half, and then I just cut like that rounded shape, as you see right here. Ta-da! And that just gives a nice opening. I'm going to have to remove Skeleton's head to get the shirt on, but at least this way I'll be able to put it on. And then, so I folded it in half the other direction. That's the back, and that's now the front. So the front is folded in half. And I'm just going to cut that into a deeper V. I don't really need this to be a sexy pirate, but I figure like he's got a rib cage, so a deeper V, you'll be able to see that a little bit more that, you know, he is a skeleton. And then I turned the shirt right side out. And I found giving it a good little beat really helped those sleeves. And that is basically the shirt. I'm not going to finish up the neckline or anything because that's going to be distressed later. But there's our nice little V-neck and our puff sleeves. And now I go in with the distressing. I'm just pulling at threads, fraying edges. There's no rhyme or reason to how much or how little you need to do. Just go to town and distress until it feels done. Oh, and I found, yeah, there's the neckline. Okay, so I'll get to that later. Yeah, to, you know, manky up some of the edges, I cut and ripped so that things didn't look quite so perfect. Cut on angles so things aren't, you know, because when fabric rips, if you're like trapped somewhere, running around, getting in fights, whatever pirates do, you know, your shirt's not necessarily going to rip in a straight line. So kind of, you know, mess it up. I ended up ripping a little bit of one of those puff sleeves. It just seemed too perfect. And as well as ripping at the edges, I found rubbing the fray really helped to make it look like it had been there a really long time. Like I hadn't just frayed it, but it had like frayed and then like deteriorated and got gross. So as well as fraying the edges, rubbing those edges really helps to make it look old and manky. And then you can add some extra rips and tears, maybe a hole. I added a little hole there about where the elbow might be. That's a good catch point. I'm always catching my elbow on doorknobs. So I figure that's a good spot for a shirt to get ripped. And I went back a little bit on the edges just to like carve out little chunks again so that the frays don't look perfectly straight. Now we're moving on to the pants. I didn't film anything before this, but I got some scrap corduroy and I just had a rectangle of it, folded that rectangle in half, and then sewed down the outsides. And I kind of measured where the skeleton's legs would be and then sewed up the leg to about the crotch, across, and then back down. And then I cut that crotch open. Well, not open, but I separated the legs. And then I could turn it right side out. And there's some lovely little pants. The ends of the pants you can see are kind of uneven, but whatever. Again, we're going to distress it. So at this point I had already put the shirt on and I had to remove the head to do that. It was a very tight fit. Probably would have been better to make the shirt bigger. But I figure it fits. I mean, over time, in the sun, salt water, the fabric might shrink, right? Maybe? I don't know. I think he looks kind of cool, though. There's no way that shirt would be able to fit if that body had muscles and skin, but it works for this purpose. The pants were really big, so I ended up using this scrap yarn, cut a nice length from it, and I'm using that as a rope belt. It's not necessary per se, but my skeleton is going to be sitting in the cage, and without this belt holding the pants at the waist, the pants would just fall right off. And I want him to at least look like he's wearing pants. It wouldn't look like that without the belt. So now I get to go to town on distressing the corduroy, which, because it had stretch to it, it did not distress as easily as the cotton shirt. I couldn't just rip this fabric. I had to cut into it, and yeah, it was really hard to get it to look raggedy. But I just went to town. I think it turned out okay. I decided to cut a hole in the knee. And again, I couldn't just like rip it and get the ragged edges. I had to go in and cut them. I ended up going back and roughing up the cuts that I had made at the cuffs because they looked just too perfect. Now I have some cold coffee here. This was the coffee that I had drunk earlier that day. And I'm just going to coffee dye the shirt. It was too pristine white. I'm just giving it a little soak in the coffee. And this shirt, the fabric, because it was 100% cotton, it took the color from the coffee super quick. So I just squeezed out the extra. There was no need to wash it, and I didn't want to risk rinsing all of the color out. So I just squeezed out as much of the extra coffee as I could and then laid out the shirt on a piece of plastic to dry off. I coffee dyed the rope belt as well. The yarn didn't take the color as well, but it did darken up a little bit. I tried coffee dyeing the pants. They did get darker, but they were already brown, so I don't know what I was expecting. Like I said, they did get a little bit darker, but it really didn't alter the color. And it took forever to dry. Those pants were soggy for days after that coffee dipping. It didn't help that it suddenly got really cold here. I think that really put a damper on it. Okay, so now I'm using some dark green paint, just in plain water. I've rinsed out the coffee bowl, and some light green paint. Actually, I think that's neon paint. Just acrylic paint from the dollar store. Mixing it up just to make a nice watery, kind of slimy, moldy green color. And I tried scrunching the shirt. Not
tie-dyeing per se, but I didn't want to completely color out the coffee. I wanted the green to sort of be patchy and still be able to see some of the brown. So I got that dipped in and then squeezed. I hadn't completely mixed up the paint. It still was pretty thick. So that's why I was rubbing the shirt in my hands there, just to help spread some of the paint. And then I just laid it out on the plastic to dry again. I tried that on the pants as well, which were still wet from the coffee, so this didn't really help. And it didn't really take either. Again, I don't know what I was expecting. But the green didn't really show up in the corduroy. So what I ended up doing is I just put some of the paint directly on my fingers and mixed it up messily, and then just rubbed, patted, mushed the paint directly into the pants. That worked better. Then I went in with some black paint and I dry brushed onto the shirt. I went in with some brown and dry brushed. I didn't film that part, but it's the same technique as what I'm doing with the black paint. It went on in some places a little thicker than I expected, but that's okay. This is really an exercise in just going with it. The goal here is not to be precise. It's to be messy. And I focused a lot of the black around the hem, the sleeve cuffs, any of the spots that I cut holes out, and the neckline. Because I figured those would be the spots that would be the dirtiest. And then after I got the black, and I put some black on the pants as well. Didn't really do much. So I mixed some white to make like a dusty gray color and slapped that on the pants. I started dry brushing, but the pants were still wet, even though this was like 2 days after the coffee and a day after the green dye. Pants were still damp. So I eventually gave up on the dry brushing and just went straight on with the paint, and that worked better. I also dry brushed a little bit of that gray on the yarn there for the rope belt, just to dirty it up a little bit. And you just basically do it until you're done. Now to fix up the cage. First, I cut off the handles, which, as you can see, is extremely difficult. As lightweight as that plastic feels, wow, it was tough. Maybe some longer scissors where I could get like more torque or whatever would have been helpful. But I went with these because my little Fiskars, they're heavyweights and they're still really sharp. So it took a considerable amount of hand strength, but I was able to eventually cut through all 4 of the handles. Then I took these bad boys outside to spray paint, and we're starting to cut it close on when this needs to get done. I totally overestimated my ability to make this craft on top of everything else that I need to do this month. If you're new here, we have 3 birthdays, an anniversary, Canadian Turkey Day. It's a lot. And Halloween. So, yeah. But thankfully, when I was able to spray paint these, it was finally dry. It had been raining, so I was fighting with that as well. But I finally got a nice dry day that wasn't too cold. Spray painted the laundry baskets. Yeah. I was very happy with that. And when they were finally dry, brought them inside, and I noticed that I hadn't done a perfect job of spray painting, but you know what? I liked it. I ended up going in with a nail file and roughed up the black and just leaned into the fact that you could still see that kind of rusty red orange. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually why I picked that particular color of baskets. I went with the orange color as opposed to, like, I think it came in green or white as well. But I thought, no, I'm going to go with the orange because then if I don't do a perfect job of spray painting, it might look like rust. And you know what? It does. I am so thrilled with that. Okay, so now it's time to put the skeleton, who is all dressed and distressed. Oh, no, first we have to distress the bones so that they look as old as the clothes. Okay, so I have my dark green, brown, and black acrylic paints. Starting with the black, put it on the paper towel. And basically, I'm just like dabbing. That's it. Just pouncing the paint on the little skeleton here. Basically, anywhere where like the bones are showing outside of the clothes, anywhere that the clothes cover, I don't have to worry about. I just want to make him look as weathered as the clothes do. And it went on a little bit um, thick and dark at first, but you know, like I did with the knee there, if you go back and you work it in, I went inside. This was important. Well, I thought it was important. Inside the chest cavity as well, because his rib cage is open and we've left the shirt with that deep V so you can see into the chest. I thought it was important that the inside of his chest not look all pristine compared, you know, because everything would be weathered and gross looking at this point. And then I went in with the dark green. I was hoping this would give it like a mossy or moldy kind of look, make him really look old. And I just did the same thing, pouncing on all the exposed skeleton bits. I don't know if you can see it there, but it was starting to look really good. Then I went in with the brown, same technique, and this is just to give it a little bit of like dirt. The black is for like aging, the green is like mold, and then the brown is like dirt, and the three colors combined look really nasty together, but in like the best way possible. And it made a mess, which means you're doing it right. Anyway, so on that bottom piece of laundry basket, as you can see, there's a hole there that I cut out, and that is for the skeletal foot. I thought it would be cool to have a leg dangling out because this cage is, you know, rusty and falling apart. So I thought that would be cool to see the skeleton's legs sticking out. Now it's time to put the head back on. I had to cut the hole a little bit more in the head to get the spine in, but then just popped back on. Oh yeah, my hands are still dirty because I haven't bothered to wash my hands. I was so excited to just get this done and put it together. Now in the top part of the laundry basket, I also cut out a few holes. And all I did to cut out all the holes was I just used scissors. And I just cut the little lattice pieces that I needed in order to get the holes in the shape that I wanted. And those lattice pieces were pretty easy to cut out. That wasn't nearly as thick of a plastic as the handles were, so that was much easier. And the holes that I cut at the top were for the hands, like the skeleton was holding on to the cage, you know, trying to get out or whatever. Oh, I kept this clip in to show that it was really difficult to put those two baskets together. I don't know if it was the cold or the spray paint or whatever, but I swear they like warped in size. Because when I had the handles on, I was able to like put them together. They wouldn't fit once I did all the modification. I don't know. But I cut a little slit at the back there so I could overlap You can see there I kind of wrapped one side around the other to make it a little smaller so it fits. And I went back and cut some more holes because I just felt like you couldn't see the skeleton as well. The cage was so dark and the holes were so close. And this is basically how I did it. Just cut the pieces that you want to cut with your scissors. Some of them were difficult to cut if you don't get the angle. You have to, there you go. If you go like straight on, it's easy to cut. Now it's time to attach, and for that I got these little zip ties. I had a whole bag full of zip ties. I got those originally last year to attach the cage of my original skeleton prisoner. So I had a bunch left over, clearly, and I'm using them to attach this cage. The needle nose pliers really came in clutch, as the kids would say, for pulling the end of the zip tie out. And once I got all the zip ties secured, then I used those needle nose pliers again to cut the ends off. And yep, you want to cut as close to the end of the zip tie as possible. You don't want any of those. I'll have to go back and fix that one. I just realized the first one I cut was a little too long. If you leave them long, you can end up getting scratched on them, and that hurts. So I like to cut them nice and close to the little zip tie lock. I also zip tied the arm that was sticking out because it kept sliding back into the cage. This way it can only slide back so far. So I don't have to go fishing for the hand again if it moves. And I ended up doing the same thing with the other hand that doesn't stick out quite as far. Same thing, it kept sliding back into the cage and I didn't want to keep fishing it out. So I just zip tied one of the arm bones to the lattice of the cage. Super simple.
Ta-da! There he is. Completely complete. So something I forgot to mention is before I spray painted, I cut some little holes in the top of the top basket. And then I got this chain. I think it's just plastic. I got this from the Dollar Tree. And each of these links is not completely attached. So they open up right there. And I was able to slide one of the links through that little hole so that this skeleton can hang up. Oh, he's gonna look so cool. Sadly, I can't do the final reveal with both of my skeleton boys hanging in the porch like they're supposed to, because I need husband for that. I am not tall enough to reach the hook, and we've misplaced the step stool. But these are going to be on display with our Halloween decorations this year, and if you want to see what they look like in their final setting, I'll post a picture over on Instagram, so make sure to check that out at some point between now and Halloween. The picture will definitely be up on Halloween at the latest. Depends on when we can get the outside decorations done. It's been pretty rainy, so we've been fighting with that. One thing I will tell you ahead of time, before these get hung, is because this chain, it looks pretty substantial, but it's very light. And this chain does not even look substantial. Because of that, what I already anticipate we're going to have to do is this will hang from the hanging plant hooks that are already on the porch. And then it will have to be anchored to the porch railings. I'm planning on using some fishing twine so that they don't swing too wildly if it does end up getting windy. I don't think they'll do any damage. They're both pretty light, even though, you know, this has metal, it might scratch things, but they're both pretty light. I don't think they'll do damage, but damage will definitely get done to them if they're swinging wildly all over the place. So I'm already anticipating that we're going to need some fishing twine to anchor these to the porch. Yeah, for a little added security. So whatever I end up doing to get these guys up, I'll make sure to make note of that in the Instagram post. I don't think we'll be revisiting this in video format though. So make sure to follow me on Instagram if you want to see these in their, well, not final resting place, but where they're going to hang out for the foreseeable future. Anyway, I hope that this has possibly inspired you, or at the very least, entertained you. I don't know about you, but I am thoroughly into spooky mood. Although I have been since October, so it wasn't really a stretch for me to get into the mood of making these. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video, lovelies, as much as I enjoyed making it. And I will see you in my next video in a couple weeks for more spooky content. I think we might be going costume route in that next video, though. We'll see. Either way, the spooky is going to continue. Until then, stay safe, stay fabulous, know that you're loved. Bye! Why, yes, I just filmed this outro wearing essentially my house coat. Thank you for noticing. It's actually a historical inspired wrapper, also inspired by Our Flag Means Death, which is a show about pirates and pirates. So I figure I don't know what I'm wearing yet today. So this is fitting because pirates. Yo ho! Oh, this is a month. Where's the rum?